I was 22 years old, standing in a cramped studio apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching my roommate Sarah pack her bags, while my boyfriend of 3 years sat on my couch telling me I was wasting my life. And I swear I could feel something inside my chest crack open like ice on a frozen lake. That's when I knew everything I'd believed about the people closest to me was a lie. My name is Skylar Jenkins, and this is about the moment I lost everything, and then became the one thing they couldn't live without. The rain hammered against the window that November afternoon, gray and relentless like it always was in Portland, and Marcus looked at me with those brown eyes I'd trusted for so long, his voice calm and clinical like he was diagnosing a terminal illness, not ending our relationship. "You're 22, Sky. You can't actually think this coding boot camp thing is going anywhere. My dad's been in tech for 20 years, and even he says these boot camps are just scams for people who couldn't get real degrees." And the way he said it, so matter-of-fact, so certain, made my stomach turn because I'd spent the last 6 months pouring every spare moment into learning to code, skipping parties, missing sleep, eating ramen for dinner 5 nights a week to afford the program. Sarah zipped up her suitcase and didn't even look at me when she said, "I'm moving in with Jenna and Amanda. They actually have their lives together. I can't keep covering your half of the rent while you play around on your laptop pretending you're going to be some tech genius." And I wanted to scream that I'd only been late on rent twice, that I'd picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop to make it up, but the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. Marcus stood up, brushing imaginary dust off his jeans, and I noticed he was wearing the watch I'd saved up for months to buy him last Christmas. "Look, maybe it's time you face reality. You barely graduated from Portland State with a communications degree. You're not exactly MIT material. These tech companies want people who actually understand this stuff, not girls who watched a few YouTube tutorials." And the way he emphasized girls made something hot and sharp twist in my gut, because he absolutely knew, about every night I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning debugging code, every weekend I'd spent in study groups, every single sacrifice I'd made. "I've already built 3 functioning apps," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to, defensive and desperate. "The instructors said I have real potential. One of them even connected me with someone at a startup downtown." Sarah laughed, actually laughed, the short, bitter sound that cut through the rain noise. "Sky, everyone tells everyone they have potential. That's literally what they're paid to say. Meanwhile, you're serving overpriced lattes to keep the lights on. When are you going to get that this isn't happening for you?" They left together, Marcus and Sarah, walking out into that cold Portland rain like they'd coordinated it. Like they'd discussed how pathetic I was behind my back. And probably they had. Probably they'd spent weeks talking about poor, delusional Skylar, who thought she could reinvent herself, who thought she could be more than what she was. And I stood there in the empty apartment with the sound of rain and traffic and my own breathing, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my entire life. I didn't cry right away. I just sat on the floor with my laptop and opened the project I'd been working on for weeks, a scheduling application for small businesses that could integrate with existing platforms. And I stared at the lines of code until they blurred together, and I thought about quitting. I really did, because maybe they were right. Maybe I was fooling myself. Maybe I should just accept that some people are meant to serve coffee, and some people are meant to build things, and I was the former pretending to be the latter. But then I remembered something my instructor, this woman named Dr. Patricia Chen, who'd worked at Google for 10 years before teaching, had said during office hours the week before. Skylar, the only difference between people who make it in tech and people who don't is that the ones who make it are too stubborn to quit when everyone tells them they're not good enough. The tech industry is built on the broken dreams of everyone who listened when someone said they couldn't do it. And she'd looked at me with this fierce intensity that made me believe her, and I'd written it down in my notebook. And now I pulled that notebook out and read those words over and over until they felt real again. So I didn't quit. I worked harder. I picked up every shift I could get at the coffee shop. I lived on instant oatmeal and black coffee. I sold my TV and my nice headphones and most of my clothes that weren't absolutely necessary. And I coded. I coded until my fingers ached and my eyes burned and my back screamed from sitting hunched over my laptop. And when I finished the scheduling app, I submitted it to a startup competition that Dr. Chen had mentioned, not because I thought I'd win, but because I needed to prove to myself that I could finish something, that I could take an idea from my head and make it real and functional and useful. 3 months went by like a fever dream, winter turning the city into this wet, gray blur, and I barely saw anyone except my classmates and the regulars at the coffee shop. I'd moved into a smaller place, basically a room in a house I shared with 4 other people in Southeast Portland, and my new roommates were fine but distant, and I preferred it that way. Preferred not having anyone around to tell me I was wasting my time. I saw Marcus once during those months, at a bar in the Pearl District where I'd gone for a classmate's birthday, and he was there with a blonde girl who looked like she'd stepped out of an anthropology catalog, and when he saw me, he actually had the audacity to come over and ask how I was doing, like we were old friends, like he hadn't gutted me. "Still doing the coding thing?" he asked, and his tone was so condescending, so dripping with false concern, that I had to grip my beer bottle to keep from throwing it, and I said yes, and he nodded slowly like I'd just admitted to a gambling addiction and said, "Well, good luck with that, seriously, I hope it works out." And the blonde girl pulled him away, and I heard her ask who I was, and I couldn't hear his response, but I saw her laugh. The startup competition results came out on a Tuesday in March, posted online at noon, and I was on my break at the coffee shop when I checked my email and saw the subject line, "Congratulations from the Pacific Northwest Startup Challenge," and my hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone, because I'd actually won second place, which came with $10,000 and a mentorship program with local tech executives and meetings with potential investors. And I had to read the email 4 times before I believed it was real, before I believed it wasn't some cruel joke. Dr. Chen called me that evening, her voice warm and proud. "I knew you had it in you, Skylar. Your application was elegant and practical and solved a real problem. That's what investors want. Now comes the hard part. You ready to turn this into an actual business?" And I said yes, even though I was terrified, even though I had no idea what I was doing, because the alternative was going back to believing Marcus and Sarah were right about me. The mentorship program connected me with a woman named Jennifer Zhao, who'd sold 2 startups and was looking for new projects to advise. And she was intense and demanding and didn't accept excuses. But she saw something in my scheduling app. She saw how it could scale, how it could serve a market that bigger companies were ignoring. "Small businesses are desperate for this kind of tool," she said during our first meeting at a cafe in Northwest Portland, her laptop open between us. "But they need it to be affordable and intuitive, and what you've built is both. We need to refine the interface, expand the features, and then we need to get you in front of serious investors. You up for that?" I spent the next 6 months working harder than I'd ever worked in my life. Jennifer introduced me to developers who helped me improve the code, designers who made the interface beautiful, business strategists who helped me understand market positioning, and slowly, painfully, my little app transformed into a real product, something professional and polished and genuinely useful. We called it Flow Schedule, and by September, we were ready to pitch to investors. The first few pitches were disasters. I stumbled over my words, forgot key statistics, failed to answer questions with confidence, and each rejection felt like confirmation that maybe Marcus had been right. Maybe I was out of my depth. But Jennifer was relentless. Every successful founder gets rejected dozens of times before someone says yes. The only question is whether you're going to give up or get better. So I practiced my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep. I memorized every possible question and answer. I learned to project confidence even when I felt like an imposter. And finally, on my 9th pitch, a venture capital firm called Cascade Ventures said yes. They saw the potential, they saw the market gap, and they offered me $250,000 for 20% of the company. I wanted to call Marcus right then. I wanted to call Sarah. I wanted to scream at them that they'd been wrong, but I didn't. I channeled that impulse into building Flow Schedule into something bigger, something better. We launched officially in January. Exactly 1 year after Marcus and Sarah had walked out of my apartment, and the response was immediate. Small businesses across Portland started signing up, then businesses in Seattle, in San Francisco, in Denver, and the user base grew faster than we'd projected, faster than I dared to hope. By the following summer, Flow Schedule had 40,000 active users and had raised $3 million in a Series A funding round led by a major Silicon Valley firm, and I hired a team of 12 people, rented an office space in the Central East Side, and got written up in TechCrunch and the Portland Business Journal, and that's when things got interesting. That's when the past came crawling back. Marcus messaged me on LinkedIn, a casual note that pretended the last year and a half hadn't happened. Hey Sky, saw you've been doing really well. Really impressive what you've built. Would love to grab coffee and catch up. I'm actually looking for new opportunities and thought you might need someone with business development experience. And I read that message 10 times, analyzing every word, every implied assumption. And what struck me was how he still didn't get it. How he still thought he could just slide back into my life. How he thought his previous cruelty could be erased by my success. Sarah reached out a few weeks later, through Instagram, a long, rambling message about how she'd always believed in me, how she knew I'd do something great, how she was so happy to see me succeeding and hoped we could reconnect, maybe get lunch. And she mentioned casually that she was looking for marketing work and had experience managing social media for local brands. And the audacity of it, the sheer transparent opportunism, would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. I didn't respond to either of them. Not yet. I let their messages sit there unread, marked as seen but unanswered, because I was building something. A plan that was elegant in its cruelty, and I needed time to execute it perfectly. Flow Schedule had been approached by several companies interested in using our platform for their internal scheduling, and one of them was StratPoint Consulting, the firm where Marcus worked, the place he'd been so proud of, where his father was a partner, and they needed a better system for managing their client meetings and project timelines. And they reached out to us through official channels, a corporate email requesting a demo, and I saw his last name in the chain, Marcus Reeves in the CC line, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. I took the meeting myself, walked into their glass tower in downtown Portland, wearing a tailored blazer that cost more than my entire wardrobe used to. And Marcus was there in the conference room, his face going pale when I walked in. And I watched him try to compose himself, try to look professional, and I delivered my pitch perfectly. Showed them exactly how Flow Schedule could solve their problems, answered every technical question with precision, and they were impressed. I could see it in their faces, in the way the partners leaned forward, in the way they asked about implementation timelines. "This is exactly what we need," one of the senior partners said. This silver-haired man who I later learned was Marcus's father. "We've been limping along with outdated systems for years. This would transform how we operate. What's the pricing structure?" I laid out the terms. Enterprise level, not cheap but worth every penny, and they agreed on the spot, wanted to move forward immediately. And then I said, "There's just one thing. We're very selective about our clients. We want to work with companies that align with our values, that invest in their people, that foster environments of mutual respect." And I looked directly at Marcus when I said it, held his gaze until he looked away, and I continued. "So we'll need to do a cultural assessment, talk to employees at various levels. Make sure this is a good fit." The assessment was standard procedure for enterprise clients. We'd done it before. But what wasn't standard was how thoroughly I examined StratPoint, how many employees I personally interviewed, how carefully I documented every complaint, every concern, every instance of outdated thinking and poor management. And what I found was a company desperately in need of modernization, a place where the old guard was holding on too tight and talented people were leaving, and I compiled all of it into a detailed report. At the final presentation, with the full partnership assembled, I delivered my findings with clinical precision. I explained that Flow Schedule could indeed help them, but that their deeper problems were structural, that they needed to invest in training, in updating their management practices, in creating pathways for younger talent, and I made specific recommendations, including that they consider bringing in fresh perspectives for their business development team, people who understood modern tech ecosystems and could communicate with startups and scale-ups. And I watched Marcus's father frown, watched him take notes, watched the moment land exactly as I'd intended. 2 weeks later, I heard through mutual connections that Marcus had been moved to a different role, something with less visibility and less opportunity, effectively sidelined, and that his father was furious with him for reasons that were never quite explained, and I didn't feel good about it exactly, but I felt something, a settling of accounts, a balancing of scales. Sarah was easier. She'd finally gotten a marketing job at a small agency that worked with local businesses, and one of those businesses was a boutique fitness studio that had signed up for Flow Schedule. And when they mentioned they were looking for better marketing support, looking to move to an agency that understood tech integration and digital strategy, I recommended someone, a talented marketer I'd met through Jennifer's network, someone young and hungry and better than Sarah had ever been, and the fitness studio made the switch, and Sarah's agency lost one of their biggest clients, and she was let go a month later. I found out because she messaged me again, more desperate this time, asking directly for a job, telling me she was struggling, that she'd made mistakes but she'd always cared about me, that she hoped I could see my way to helping an old friend, and the word friend sat there on my screen like a joke, like a word that had lost all meaning. I responded this time, kept it brief and professional. "Thanks for reaching out. Unfortunately, we don't have any positions that match your experience at this time. Best of luck in your search." And I knew she'd read between those lines, knew she'd understand that the door was closed, that some things broken can't be fixed. Flow Schedule hit 100,000 users by the end of that year, and we opened offices in Seattle and San Francisco, and I hired more people, built a company culture based on supporting ambition and rewarding hard work. And I thought a lot about those early days, about that November afternoon when Marcus told me I wasn't good enough, when Sarah laughed at my dreams, and I realized something strange, which was that I didn't hate them anymore. I just didn't think about them at all. They'd become irrelevant, footnotes in a chapter I'd already moved past. But sometimes late at night, working in my office with the city lights spread out below me like scattered diamonds, I'd remember that moment on the floor of my old apartment, that feeling of being small and worthless and defeated, and I'd think about how many people are walking around right now feeling exactly that way, being told by someone they trust that they're not enough, that they should give up, that their dreams are childish fantasies, and I'd think about how the greatest satisfaction wasn't in their failure, it was in the fact that I'd become someone they needed, someone whose approval they sought, someone whose success made their earlier cruelty look foolish and small. Marcus still works at his father's firm, probably always will, trapped in a career he never really chose. And Sarah bounces between jobs, her Instagram a carefully curated fiction of happiness that anyone can see through. And they both know now what they didn't know then, which is that the girl they mocked was stronger than they ever were, that she built something real while they were coasting on false certainty, and that the only reason they're not part of it, not benefiting from it, not riding the wave they said would never come, is because they couldn't see potential when it was standing right in front of them, bleeding and desperate and willing to prove them wrong. And now they never will.